People were starting to say it's an East Coast, West Coast rivalry because it was people that's trying to make money. It was true people trying to make careers. It was people trying to get famous. And Tupac's a legend. Like I said, Tupac wasn't born, he was sent to us.
People will start to say it's a East Coast, West Coast rivalry because it was people that's trying to make money. It was true. People trying to make careers is people trying to get famous. And Tupac's a legend. Like I said, Tupac wasn't born. He was sent to us. It happened just after lights out. A half-second too long lingered between the buzz of the electric lock and the creak of Suge Knight's cell door swinging open. No one moved. No guard in sight. No warning. Then hell broke loose. Shadows swept in fast, blunt force, shouting, muffled by flesh meeting steel. When it was over, Suge lay there, bloody, battered, barely conscious. Bones cracked, lips split. And yet, in the eerie silence that followed, it was the missing sound that told the real story. The cameras. They hadn't caught a thing. Named S.E. did Diddy 77 times in court documents related to Tupac's. We're talking about a man housed in one of the most secure prison wings in the state. Suge Knight, founder of Death Row Records, the architect of West Coast dominance in the 9S, attacked in what prison officials are calling an isolated incident. But insiders aren't buying it. Not when the surveillance system conveniently glitched. Not when the playback file was corrupted. Not when the only working camera was pointed at a mop bucket. This wasn't a brawl. This was theater, a cold-blooded act staged to look like chaos. And the cast, still unnamed, still unchecked. Because here's the thing, Suge's not just a convict. He's a walking archive of hip-hop's dirtiest secrets. And lately, he's been talking. From his prison podcast to phone calls with reporters, Knight's been stirring the pot like he's got nothing left to lose. Spilling stories most of the industry would rather stay buried. Names, deals, betrayals, and something far worse. Truths that point to a cabal of power players whose influence runs so deep, even from behind bars, Suge may have gotten too close to lighting a match. The whispers grew louder after his latest bombshell. Suge claims that Shakur, the icon, the martyr, the symbol of rebellion, actually begged to be let go, not to be saved, not to fight through the bullet wounds and the agony. According to Knight, Shakur said, "I'll before I go back, he shoot me." Suge says those words were spoken in the hospital and that Afeni Shakur Pak's own mother honored that wish. Not only that, but allegedly instructed the doctors not to revive her son when he slipped away the first time. That's the kind of revelation that bends history and breaks legacies. The only man currently facing charges in the case, Dwayne "Keffy" Davis claims that Sean Combs, also known as Diddy, paid for a hit on Tupac. We've heard wild rumors before. We've lived through holograms and he's alive in Cuba theories. But this came from the only man in the car with Shakur that night in Las Vegas. And if Sue's telling the truth, then the question shifts from who pulled the trigger to who let it stick. Afeni was a fiercely protective figure, beloved and respected. But what if Suge's account reveals something more calculated? A decision born not out of love, but out of resignation or worse, pressure. Who stood to gain from Shakur's silence? Right now, Davis is fighting for bail ahead of his trial, which he has pleaded not guilty for. Jug insists that it wasn't just Shakur who was scared of returning to prison. The idea of being caged again after brushing so close to freedom, power, and prophetic legacy, that alone, he says, is what broke Pac's will. But others aren't so sure. Former death row associates claim this is Suge trying to rewrite the narrative, blame the system, shift attention. Yet, the timeline, the mood, the desperation, it does line up with Pac's legal troubles that day. There was a fight at the MGM Grand, possible charges incoming, tensions with the East Coast rising, and rumors of betrayal swirling like vultures. And this is where things get colder. Suge's not just dredging up Shakur's final wishes, he's tying them directly to the bigger power structure. On his podcast, Collect Call, he's been inching closer to outright calling out the industry for orchestrating hits, hiding evidence, and silencing voices. One episode, he flat out said that Diddy deserves jail for Shaker's end. Another time, he hinted that Dre had paid people to have him taken out. And when asked about the Combs trial, Knight didn't dance around it. He said Diddy was just part of a much larger disease. Yes. Yes. He hated every bit of it. I remember one time, he was like, who did you grow up listening to? I'm like, Tup. I ain't mention Big. That, __, even talked to me for like 4 days after that. Everything with Pot, like you couldn't say Pot was anything better than Big. You can't put them in the same realm or nothing. It was all about Big. Which begs the real question. Was Suge's attack retaliation for slandering these sacred cows of hip-hop? Or was it preemptive damage control by people even he hasn't named yet? Because let's not forget this man also said someone once showed him cancelled checks tied to a homicide for hire plot. He's gone after Dre, Diddy, even Afeni. He's named names that no one else would dare breathe aloud. And then suddenly he's ambushed in a facility where even toothpaste gets logged and watched. People close to the case claimed Suge had recently filed for a new hearing, trying again to overturn his 28-year sentence. The court rejected it. But maybe the goal wasn't freedom. Maybe it was exposure. Because buried inside that filing were allegations that his own legal team railroaded him, that the system sabotaged him. That he was virtually incommunicado before accepting the deal that put him away. One lawyer called the whole thing shocking and unconscionable. Another warned the public if it happened to Suge, it can happen to anyone. And that was to destroy East Coast rap. And what I mean by that, and I know people gonna like, Gene is out of his mind. And everything like that. Check this out, brother. And while all of this swirls in public back inside that prison, Suge is surrounded by silence. No official statement from his attackers. No names, no motives, no transfers, just bruises and silence. And every time he opens his mouth on that prison phone, another thread gets pulled. Another old grudge reopens. Another ghost starts whispering. When he said Puffy knows secrets on his podcast, it wasn't bravado. It was a warning when he joked about Combs being in danger in prison. That wasn't shade. It was experience. And now Suge knows that every sentence he speaks could be his last. Because let's not forget, Knight's name has come up at least 50 times during Diddy's ongoing human trafficking trial. Some say he's basking in the spotlight again. Others think he's laying breadcrumbs. Either way, his attacks on Combs aren't just personal. They're strategic. Tied to decades of bad blood. From East Coast, West Coast feuds to whispered NDAs and shady boardroom deals. He's framing Diddy not as the lone monster, but as a symptom, just one infected piece of a poison system. They did not want East Coast rappers to get big. They were suppressing all new artists that was coming out of New York. Jay and Diddy was doing that. And now with his own body broken from an incident that's looking more like a hit with every new detail, Suge Knight might be running out of time to talk. But that's never stopped him before. In fact, it's only made him louder. He's not just painting himself as the villain. He's inching toward martyrdom. The power-hungry mogul who once crushed rivals with a phone call is now cast as a prophet, screaming into the storm while the very industry he helped build tightens the news. 'Cause him and Diddy was given that deal. We gotta keep these East Coast rappers down 'cause down South rappers, Cash Money, what you call it? No Limit Ludacris now. They was taking little money and bringing back more money and making more money for them. But why now? Why the escalation? Could it be the Shakur files reopening? Could it be KEF's upcoming trial and the names he might still drop? Or are we watching a final act unfold? One man spilling everything before the curtain comes crashing down. We don't know who orchestrated the attack on Suge Knight. But we do know this. It was clean, efficient, and left no trail. And in the cold calculus of power, that's not vengeance, that's containment. And then there's the Tamsburgers incident. What some are now calling the homicide burger setup. Suge Knight may be serving time for manslaughter, but his version of what happened in that Compton parking lot reads less like a reckless act and more like an ambush scripted by people with something to lose. Suge didn't hesitate when naming names. He claims he was lured there under the pretense of meeting with Dre, the same man he once helped elevate to icon status. According to Suge's sworn testimony, a call came in from a mutual contact saying Dre wanted to make peace. A meeting of minds to finally squash the tension born out of years of legal fights and whispered threats. But when Suge showed up, what he found instead was fists flying and minutes later a man lying still beneath his wheels. They was not scared of Suge Knight. They was terrified of Suge. Suge insists he acted in fear, reacting to an ambush. And then came the real bombshell that Dre had allegedly hired someone to take him out, not just once, but possibly twice. Suge testified under oath that someone had shown him voided checks linked to an alleged homicide for hire scheme. He told the court, "I was told that he had paid some guys to harm me." Now, pause on that because if even a sliver of that is true, then the incident at Tams wasn't just a tragedy. It was a trap. A high-stakes power move staged in broad daylight wrapped in plausible deniability and filmed just a few blocks from the set of Straight.